What's going on, everyone? I'm Paul, and welcome to Season 2 of the Low to High podcast. As my first guest for the season opener, I interviewed Rutgers alum and current Redwoods Lacrosse Club attackman, Jules Heninburg. Jules and I spoke about his upbringing in lacrosse, how he became the player he is today, and much more. Make sure to go check out Jules' podcast that he co-hosts called Untitled Chapter, where he interviews the best players in the PLL. Make sure to go follow him on Instagram at Jules Heninburg. Now, without further ado, let's get right into it. What's up, everyone? With me today on the season opener of the Low to High pod is the Redwoods LC attackman and current podcaster like myself, Jules Heninburg. Jules, what's going on, man?
Yeah, what's going on, man? How we doing?
Doing good. How's the West Coast treating you?
West Coast is great. I'm out here in San Diego. It's a beautiful day today. I went outside for my lift earlier. Went down to 19 Fitness. That's where I usually work out, and I got one in. And now I'm back here chilling, getting the rest of the day going.
How long have you been out there for?
So I've been in San Diego for 2 years, but I had a little bit of a stint in LA for 6 or 7 months over the summer of 2019 PLL season into the fall.
What do you like better, San Diego or Los Angeles?
Definitely more of a San Diego guy. I like being here for kind of how the week's set up. I think Los Angeles is a little bit hectic, driving around to different spots and going to the grocery store, trying to get to the gym, things like that. But it's definitely nice up there to go out on the weekends and go to the beach and stuff. But I'm always able to go up there if I want to and kind of touch in with the people I know. But during my weekly routine, I'd rather be in a more slow-paced San Diego.
You miss the East Coast at all?
I mean, sometimes I think I go back there enough that it's not not the end of the world. I think COVID's kind of messed that up a little bit, but I'm going back to New Jersey for winter, not winter break, but 2 weeks in winter time around Christmas, and then I'll head back there probably around May again after that. So,
what do you think is the biggest plus about moving out to the West Coast instead of staying on the East Coast?
Definitely the weather is the biggest factor. I think as a lacrosse player and professional player now, I really I've always invested in training over my career, but now that I'm older and I'm able to see that, in New Jersey, it's much harder to find an indoor place during the wintertime. During the summertime, it's really hot outside, where here it's consistent year round. And that gives me the ability to, always get out in the field without it being too stressful. And, as well as coaching and doing stuff on the field with the Juke Lab stuff that I do and the FCL stuff. It's nice to have good weather year round for that.
Do you think you being on the West Coast kind of minimizes your connections to like all the lacrosse players on the East Coast? How you work with First Class and how Deemer's out in Maryland and all the other guys are over in Baltimore and New York. Do you think you're kind of missing out on that, or do you think you like it better that you almost have like your own hub of lacrosse players to train with?
No, I think it's very much relationships based. So if you can maintain those relationships and develop them with different touch points over the course of the year and then 2 years, and those guys' careers that you're looking to work with and develop relationships with, it's fine. If I was back in New Jersey, I'd probably be coaching at Seton Hall, and that, so I'd know all the Seton Hall guys, but I wouldn't necessarily be building relationships with the other guys in the other towns unless I really invested into that. So I think it's just nice to be in San Diego, like I said, with the weather, and I'm able to fly around the country with FCL and the Juke Lab, and meet different players from all over the country to start building relationships with.
That's awesome. So, I think it was Paul Rabel named you the new host for season 2 of the Unbuckled Chin Strap pod. How do you feel about it? And how have you adjusted to almost being like the person that's asking the questions instead of you trying to explain everything on podcasts before?
So it's definitely different. I mean, you're a podcaster yourself, so it's not easy to kind of steer the conversation in the direction that you want it, and it's very different for each person. But overall, I think it's been a great experience so far. I think I've been growing each episode and improving. The 3rd episode will be coming out this week, and I'm excited. So very excited for that one. I felt like it was the best one. Very more conversational. I think that's the biggest thing. Is you want to make it, like a conversation, less of just questioning someone back and forth. And just having Paul be able to put me in the position to be able to host a podcast, I'm very grateful for that, just because it's an opportunity for me to grow and grow my platform and my voice and the things that I believe are important and the conversations I want to have with players.
Yeah. So not like you lucked out, but you were fortunate you had Paul on your first episode of the podcast, and Paul's a great guy to have talking commentary with. And I think in my first and second episode, I had Jake, who runs his own YouTube channel, so he's really familiar with it. And then I think Mitchell Pelkey. He was on you were on his podcast. He's a hilarious guy. He's a character. So
Yeah,
having a guy like that is so beneficial to someone who's just starting out with it, because they help flow the conversation. They know how this stuff works better than you do, and it makes the conversation way more comfortable overall.
definitely. And it's all, that's what it's all about. You want the flow of the conversation, and someone, that brings up things as the conversation goes outside of the things that potentially you wanted to even talk about. And that's when you just kind of get into that natural rhythm.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start off with a couple basic questions. Where are you from originally, Jules?
Originally from Maplewood, New Jersey, back on the East Coast.
When did you start first getting into lacrosse?
I first picked up a stick when I was 7 years old in the second grade.
What club teams did you play for when you were growing up?
I first played club lacrosse going into ninth grade for Trilogy Lacrosse. And then after that, I played for a team called DeSico Lacrosse for a year and a half. And then I played leading edge for, my last 2 years of high school.
All right. I'm going to throw you a little zinger right now. What are your top 3 favorite sport movies?
Number 1, Remember the Titans. Number 2, Glory Road. Number 3, Miracle.
When do you think the next big lacrosse movie is going to come out besides Crooked Arrows?
I think, I would assume someone or something in the PLL would, be creating that. They just came out with a book. I think they're ahead of the curve with this kind of stuff. So potentially something, in the PLL, or, something with a Lyle Thompson, someone like that, someone really high up in the game, that's looking to, make something that's really defining the sport and in the moments that we're in.
Yeah. Who were some of your favorite players growing up?
I think my favorite player growing up was Billy Bitter. He was a UNC attackman. Are you familiar with Billy Bitter?
Yeah, I know who Billy Bitter is.
Yeah, he was the I had him as my Facebook profile picture when I was in 8th grade. And it's so funny looking back on the young kids now and kind of seeing, how they look up to players. I was like, well, that's who I wanted to be when I got to college, because he was a dynamic ex-attackman. He had a great change of direction. So I always try to emulate him. And then Steele Stanwyck, who's also an ex-attackman quarterback player, had both hands. I felt like I always had both hands. Rob Pennell, not that I really emulated as many things as Rob Pennell, just because he's a different style of player than I am. But just, watching him live at MetLife Stadium was an unreal experience for me. I remember he had like 6 goals versus Princeton when I was there. And I was like, this is, so cool. I want to be able to play at the highest level and be like that. So those are a couple of the guys that I always looked up. I didn't really start looking into that stuff until 7th grade, like 8th grade, when my friends started talking about like Johns Hopkins in 6th grade. And I was like, what the hell is Johns Hopkins?
I remember, must have been like 6th or 7th grade. I had a photo of Matt Rambo and Colin Heacock shoulder bumping each other as my Instagram profile page for a good solid years until 9th grade. And then someone brought it up and then I had to change it. So I fully understand when you said that about your Facebook page. So tell me a little bit about your high school career. Where'd you originally start playing?
So I originally started playing at Columbia High School in Maplewood. Are you familiar with Columbia High School?
No, I'm not.
It's so Maplewood's public school. I mean, Columbia High School is a public school in Maplewood. We have 2 towns that feed into Columbia. They were really good back in the day. So in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, and then early 2000s, they're pretty good. But they started to kind of teeter off a little bit late 2000s, like 2008, 2009. And that's right when I was kind of getting into the program. And it was just something around the town that it was like, who's going to come into Columbia and kind of, change the culture and do a lot of that stuff, heavy lifting of the program that needed to be done for them to get back to where they'd been before. So that was something like my grade and the grade above me and the grade below me were always kind of, thinking about and I'm talking about is like going to Columbia and changing the program, bringing it back to the old days. So that was like my mindset going in there. And I wanted to be the best player that I could be and bring a state championship to Columbia again. So I went there my 9th grade year. the coach told me that no freshmen are allowed to play varsity, which that was tough for me to hear because I'd been playing with those guys on the varsity team and guys that were heading into the varsity year in the off season since like sixth grade. And so I knew the level of player I was compared to those guys and, what I could do with them when we'd play other competition. But then I wasn't able to try out for the team. So that was really hard for me. And I knew I could be contributing to that team and felt like we could have done better if I was out there. And then my sophomore year, I come back. Just from that, I felt like made a bit of a rift with the coach and I. I was second on the team in points behind another one of our friends that was going to play Division One. We were 8-8 as the best record Columbia had, and they still have had in the last 10 years. And I was just like the way that the coach was treating me and things that were happening with him. I was like, I'm not going to stay here if other guys in the program aren't investing the way that I am investing into it and believe that it can really go in the trajectory of the program. And with a coach that doesn't see the value in me as a player and a leader on the team. So I transferred to Seton Hall Prep after that. And then transfer rules, I had to sit out for 30 days for both basketball and lacrosse. So I sat out. We were 2-8 when I started to play, which was now I'm like transferring into a school where we're worse record than I was in my old school. And that was, frustrating. And then we went on a 10-game winning streak. When I started playing, we beat Del Barton, who was number one in the country at the time. And then we made it to the state championship. And we lost to Don Bosco in the state championship, that really good Don Bosco team in 2013. Then senior year came back, we were 16-4. Had a great run senior year. And now Seton Hall is one of the perennial powerhouses in the country. So it was a little bit of up and down high school career, but I'm definitely grateful for the experiences I had in growing programs and, having a lot of different experiences through that.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a word and tell me what the first thing comes to your mind is when I say it. Del Barton.
I can't say the first word that comes to mind with them, but the enemy.
So tell me a little bit about that game. I know it was a pretty thrilling game. It was the biggest upset in the country in recent history. So you mind going in depth about that game?
Yeah. So we were coming into that game. Del Barton and Seton Hall always go back and forth in terms of just it being a rivalry. They're the prep school that dominates lacrosse in New Jersey, and Seton Hall is usually one step behind them, two steps behind them, depending on Bergen Catholic, Don Bosco. So they're really in a tier of their own, but always getting a run for their money from Seton Hall. So earlier that season, I wasn't playing and we lost them by 1 goal. And then in my head, I was like, well, if I was out there, I'd be occupying one of their best players, opening up, more things for other guys in the field and being more of a presence behind the cage and just orchestrating. And I knew that if I was out there, that we would have won that game. So coming into that game, I was I was always confident, especially when we'd play teams like that, just because I wanted to prove myself and prove that I, deserved to be in the conversation for one of the best players. And that was an opportunity to showcase that. So we came in and we went up 8, I think it was 8-0. And at halftime, it was like 9-2. And then they came storming back and it was ended up winning us 10-8. So we only scored 1 goal in the second half. So we kind of started to play a little timid, I think, in the second half, which, I think that was kind of a downfall of our team a little bit, but, not that it was a fluke, but definitely came out hot. And, being able to maintain that lead is important and keep hitting the other team with the punches. So I'm glad we escaped out of there with the victory. But, in terms of it being one-sided, them being number one team in the country, us being 2-8, and then coming back to storm back and then beating them is a pretty cool experience.
What was the post-game locker room celebration like at Seton Hall Prep after that?
I think the post game, we didn't have locker rooms, so it's off to the side with all the parents just going to hug everyone. And I remember my dad wasn't at the game, so calling him and being like, "We did it, we beat Del Barton, like we're going to the state championship, like, this is crazy." And then get on the bus after with the guys was awesome, and just playing the song "Clarity." You know that song?
Yeah,
that was like our theme song for going into that game and after that game. So it's pretty cool. That's
really cool. So what was your recruiting landscape like during your some years of high school?
I started to get recruited actually when I was in 10th grade. So that fall. And then after that was like I remember coaches first saw me play at tournaments, and my coach at the time, Andrew DeSico, was mentioning to me, hey, go talk to this coach. He's interested in you a little bit, or the Princeton coach is talking about you over there. So then I was like, okay, like there's something here. And then fast forward that next summer going into my junior year, that was when I thought that everyone was supposed to get recruited, but the cycle sped up a year for my class and then sped up another year after I graduated college or high school, excuse me. So at that point it was rising freshman, but mine was rising sophomore. So all the quote unquote blue chip players were picked up by the blue blood programs, the Big Ten, the ACCs, when I was a rising sophomore. And like I said, that fall, I kind of played in a couple tournaments and heard some things, but then that summer was really when I went to get recruited and I started playing with Leading Edge. But at that point, all the verbals had really been filled up. So I really wanted to go to UNC. I wanted to be the next Billy Bitter. And, they committed 2 or 3 attackmen. So there was really no opportunity for me to go to that school. And, as an attackman, every class it's 2 or 3 spots. So if Maryland fills there 2 and Notre Dame there 2 and UNC there 3, and it's 20 guys and you just missed the boat because you didn't know to get recruited, that's a tough position to be in, or that's the position I was in. And I felt like it was a tough position to be in at the time. And then, I think I was a good recruit on the circuit. I wasn't a standout recruit. I don't think my style really fits that, electric, dynamic, balanced player. That's just going to break everyone down from the midfield and shoot it on the run at 15 and just really stand out in the showcase environment. It was more just doing the right things, being in the right spots at the right time, making the best plays. It's still the same way I play to this day. And so I think I kind of, wasn't good enough to stand out for those coaches to be like, hey, we're going to take you, even though we already have 3 attackmen. But I was good enough for the other teams to notice, hey, this kid can play and maybe he's got some potential. We can do something with him. So I ended up getting recruited by a number of mid-major programs. And then I ended up deciding between Rutgers, Navy, and Delaware. And then for me, a big thing was finances. I had to, pay for school or get a scholarship. So Navy was free. I was getting a scholarship at Delaware, and it was close to my family. And it was also, I think it was $30,000 to go there, and I could get a scholarship. And then Rutgers was in-state with a scholarship. So that's kind of how it worked out. And then, with Rutgers, it was very much come here with Coach Brecht, and I believe you can change the culture of this program and change Rutgers' trajectory. And so, that's something that I felt like I did at Seton Hall, and I had a lot of confidence that I could do at Rutgers as well.
Do you think the new recruiting landscape now that you have to commit September 1st, your junior year, would have helped you, or if it was happening when you were trying to get recruited?
Yeah, definitely. I think it would have helped me a lot, just because it would have given coaches the opportunity to see me as a sophomore, and then also communicate with coaches that knew who I was as a person and knew my background and knew my character, because that is a really important thing when it comes to recruiting. In my opinion, the IQ of a player and his character are the 2 most pivotal things. And if you don't have those 2, you're really throwing, paint at the wall and hoping that it sticks, because a player can be, and I've seen it time and time again, he could be the most talented player in the world, but if he doesn't understand, academics, or doesn't understand how to be a good teammate in the locker room, or doesn't understand how to, respect people on the weekend, like there's so many different things, you're never going to see his skills pan out. And I've seen that, like I said, so many times before. So I think coaches college coaches now that could have talked to my high school coach and could learn, me transferring to Seton Hall and what that was like, and the type of player I was in the locker room there. And, my Leading Edge coaches, when they didn't know I was even a player in New Jersey that was good until I came and tried out for Leading Edge. And at that point, it was like they had already been talking to all these coaches about the other players, and it was just a little bit too late. So,
yeah, you even see it now, like even before the recruiting rules changed, that kids would commit like 8th grade, and then like senior year they end up switching, and it happened to a bunch of kids. Even you see it now with new recruiting rules, like they commit September 1st, and then like 2 days before their NLI they switch up where they're going to go. So it's kind of tough to tell. I mean, I'm not in that position, but I think you're a completely different person, especially if you're a freshman committing to a junior committing, or even a junior committing to where you want to go to, like being a senior, because you kind of want to know what you want to do with your life a little bit more, instead of just like going by like, oh, how good they are, like this sounds cool to go to this college. So it's a really interesting process how that all works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's definitely it's not a perfect science, but some of those kids that did get recruited when they're younger, they panned out. But like you said, a lot of kids don't pan out, and a lot of kids switch schools and commit for the wrong reasons when they're young. We have kids at Torrey Pines that some of the things that they do in the recruiting process are, I'm just flabbergasted. And I would never, like, my dad told me when I was getting recruited that my verbal commitment was a hand, and I shook that coach's hand. That was my word, was my bond. Like, I was going to that school. He wasn't taking the time to invest in me as a player and talk to me on the phone and build a relationship with me for me to just like pull that all out under the rug. My dad just didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. So when I told him I was going to commit to Rutgers, he said, "You commit there, you're going to Rutgers." And again, I think that's just a character thing, and I think that it's hard to read and judge character and really know the true type of person it is when you're a freshman, and you're just getting to high school and everything's so new to you, and you can just shoot it from 15 on the run with both hands and you have a little bounce in your step, and that's not it. That's not the only thing that matters.
Yeah, I think you're completely right about like people say, like, people not taking like their word seriously. Like, you could, I'm pretty sure this probably happened before, but someone commits a verbal commit somewhere just to try and leverage with someone else to say, "Oh, I just committed here. Do you really want me?" Like, I'll drop my commitment if I go with you. So stuff like that is really just not like ethical, in a sense that, like, it was good that your dad instilled that to you early, like that your word is what you're going to do. So that was very good on how you were raised on your part.
I appreciate that. And on the flip side, coaches will commit you as a player and then ditch the school. So it's a business, but you have to understand who you're committing to and build that trust enough to know that coach is going to be there, by the time you graduate. And that was something that I didn't realize about the assistant coaching carousel, was Coach Cromwell, who was a big reason why I committed to Rutgers. He's really the Rutgers GOAT, in my opinion. He's the all-time leading point scorer there. And he was going to be my offense coordinator. And I was so excited to learn from him, and, felt like I could kind of take that, position from him through him teaching me, and kind of lead Rutgers as one of the all-time greats and change the program. And then he just, he left, and it was so crushing. And I didn't even think that was possible at the time, because I was so naive as a player.
Have you ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire?
I've not, no.
Oh, never, because there's a whole scene in there about, like, he's like a sports agent, and the guy shakes his hand. He's like, "Oh, my head, like that's my word," and then he just completely ditches that. So like, it's kind of similar to that. So kind of moving back a little bit, like talking about how you developed as a player. So you grew up with a lot of brothers and sisters in your house. How did that kind of mold into the player that you were today?
So my brother, he's 2 years older than me. We were always competing against each other when we were younger. We both were in love with basketball. I still love basketball to this day, but that was really what we wanted to do. We thought, we were both going to go to the NBA. We used to go to Nets games with my grandfather, and, he had season tickets. So we'd go, every other week with my grandfather to the games, and me and my brother would play AAU together and do all this stuff. And in that, we were always competing with each other, against each other, in the backyard, and pick up basketball at the courts. And, he was big and broad, and I'm much skinnier player. So it was always a running joke in our family, if you could combine us together, we'd be like the perfect athlete. But, when we were in the backyard playing, we had a light back there. So we used to be out there till 1 o'clock at night. And then it was on this dirt kind of setup. It wasn't concrete. It was literally dirt, and there was roots growing out of the ground. And it got to the point where I got good enough to get by him, and beat him, and I was quicker than him. So he had to figure out how to, make it competitive for himself again. So he used to, whenever I go up for layups, he used to grab me out of the air and throw me into the roots to hurt me, to make it count. And my dad used to say, "No blood, no foul." So my brother took that seriously, and so did I. And, when I go up for the layup, he'd come back from behind me after I just did a quick move. I'm like free reign. He's coming up and just throwing me into the ground. So I had to figure out ways to kind of go up and then sneak out of it and get past him, and just stuff like that, and competing with him in the backyard. And then from there, playing with him, I played up always on every team. My dad always made sure that somehow he could bend the rules that I could play with my brother, because he always wanted to see that and have me have that experience. That was what really, made it impactful for me as far as being an athlete and, having that influence.
So going forward with the basketball thing, how did basketball impact your game in lacrosse?
So I think basketball, there was a couple of things. And I think the biggest thing was the level of competition on the basketball court was much higher than lacrosse, in my opinion, for a couple of reasons. I think the first reason is that there are some sports where there's just a guy, on the other side of you. You can look him in the eyes, and you're going just back and forth with him. A sport like boxing or UFC, for example, that is so highly competitive because it's you or him in a fight to the death, quote unquote. You could get killed out there, and that's not the point. But when you're boxing someone, like, you can get knocked out, and it's it's real. In basketball, it's not to that degree, but when there's another player on the other side and I'm matched up with their shooting guard and he has the ball, it's a one-on-one competition. When I'm going to grab that rebound, I'm boxing him out, and it's a one-on-one competition for that rock. When we're doing suicides, for example, in the gym, and it's your 10 teammates, it's like, that is real. That's competition that I felt like I didn't see in lacrosse as much. So when I got to play lacrosse, I was like, this is much easier kind of in terms of competing, because I'm always on. Like, you can't take plays off in basketball. You're going to get exposed. The guys who are playing, it's a different, just different crop of people altogether. And I felt like we were very competitive, my teammates and I, from a very young age in basketball. When we were in sixth grade, we won the championship in our town 3 years in a row. All of us thought we were going to the NBA and go to play Division I basketball. So it was just this constant thing. And then when I go play lacrosse, I would bring that attitude and that compete and that toughness to the lacrosse field. And I felt like that was always an advantage that I had. And then on the flip side with skill sets, I think basketball it has a pace to it, where you're constantly moving. You constantly have to be aware and react, and again, just utilize getting open in tight spaces and the vision on the court. So a lot of those things are things that I brought to the lacrosse field to be the quarterback and be someone that was always on the ball and always ready for things to happen and reacting quickly. And that's all things that I feel like you can see in my game to this day.
Did you ever think about possibly playing, like, doing a fifth year after playing at Rutgers like Pat Spencer did? Maybe playing a little bit of lacrosse, playing a little bit of basketball?
Yes, my dad and I actually talked about that, and I don't think I'm not good enough to play in terms of being a starter. Pat Spencer obviously dominated for that Northwestern team. He was one of their captains and lead players on the offensive side. I don't think I'm as fluid as him on the basketball court, nor was I as touched up. I think he played a lot over the years through his 4 years in the summertime. I know he never picked up a stick in the summer. He was always playing pickup hoops. So I thought it was something I would have to really invest a lot of time into as an athlete. That's just the type of person I am. And I felt like if I did that, then it would be taking away from lacrosse. So I did think about it. I know I could play and be a competitive player in practice, hold the guys accountable in practice, competing against them, drain shots when I needed to, make the right reads. But I didn't think I would be the player that would be starting on game day or anything like that. So I didn't really want to just be a bench player and doing that another round of Division I sport again, like I just did for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think it's really I don't know what I'd say underrated about how athletic lacrosse players really are and how much they've excelled in other sports, whether it's like in high school or in college, that it's not really spoken about. Like, you see, there's a bunch of lacrosse players that were in this year's senior class in the NCAA that thought about playing college football at the highest level, and some that actually ended up doing it. Then you think about some of the NFL players like Chris Hogan and Jim Brown, who played lacrosse in college, and especially Chris Hogan, who played 4 years of college lacrosse, then decided to go play football a fifth year and then go to the NFL. It just truly shows how athletic you have to be, or how athletic lacrosse players really are, instead of just being what like the typical lacrosse player is, just fast and shifty. It combines every single part of your body, which I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I feel that it's something that's really not shown about in lacrosse.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because lacrosse is the type of sport where you could be the biggest, fastest, strongest in the world, but if you can't move the ball off a quick pull pass when a slide comes to you from the midfield, or roll away and protect your stick from the outside. It doesn't matter if you can't read the defense to know, how things are, where the slides are coming from and what you need to do and what your job is. Like, it just doesn't matter. If you can't clear through off ball and pop behind the ball to help your teammate, right? It doesn't matter how big and fast and strong you are. Where, in football, there are certain positions on the field where if you're not the biggest, fastest, and strongest, like you're not even in the conversation to be out there to begin with. And same with basketball. If you're not jumping 40 off the deck, right, then usually you're not even in the conversation, depending on what your height is, because you can't get up to block someone's shot that's Kevin Durant size that's shooting over you. So you're a liability on the defensive side. So it's very much, I think, the tier of athlete in the other sports, basketball, football, you have to be a certain level of athlete to even be out there in the conversation. In certain football, in certain positions, right, on the line, linebacker. But if you're a receiver, right, and you know how to move, or if you're running back and you're elusive and you have the agility, right, those are the kind of the skill sets that transfer over to lacrosse. But I'd be curious to see what the pinnacle lacrosse athlete looks like. Think of like a Metcalf, like what he would be like on the lacrosse field. What is his position? Is he going to be a close defenseman? Is he going to be an attack, right? What is that?
A D-midi? Is he going to be a D-midi or
Well, so I think any football athlete can really pick up a stick and play defensive midfield, because there's not much that he needs to understand except the concept of the defense. And then his hips are the most important thing for the guy in front of him, which if you're playing football, right, that is, if you're a defensive back or you're a linebacker, right, it's all lateral movement and paying attention to the guy in front of you. So there's easy transferable things, but then there's also things I look at, like, Kyrie Irving, for example, or someone like a Steph Curry. How would they transfer to lacrosse? But they're not the size of, Jadeveon Clowney. So it's kind of like, I wonder how that's all going to play out kind of down the line in the sport as it continues to evolve.
Yeah, I could see some players. I could see cornerbacks definitely being D-middies, point guards. I'm assuming you were probably a point guard in high school. Am I right?
As a shooting guard.
Or shooting guard. Point guards and shooting guards would be the ex-attackmans. And then Bill Belichick actually brought up this really really interesting concept that he would see quarterbacks as the goalies, because they have to be the smartest guys on the field. They have to know everything. He said that Tom Brady, if he were to play lacrosse, he would be one of the greatest goalies of all time. So that's actually really cool to think about, how not only the physical game, but the mental IQ as well, all translates into different sports.
Totally.
So moving on from that, so you decided to go play ball at Rutgers. What was your experience there for your time there?
My experience at Rutgers was, I think, I learned a lot as a person and as a teammate and as a player. I think when I got there, we started my freshman year, we were 5-10, and by the time we finished, we were a top 10 team in the country. So it was very much an upward trajectory for myself personally and the team. And I think those trends kind of went hand in hand. There are the couple of guys on our team that I felt like invested a lot into the program, and the more that those guys invested, including myself, the more that we saw the program improve, both from our positions individually, and then the influences that we were able to have on the younger players and our teammates, because we weren't a program that was getting star-studded recruits. We were getting guys that were hungry and had something to prove, and were coming from non-hotbed areas. And that was important for us to be able to get the most out of guys on game day, get the most out of guys over the course of the fall and the winter time when you go home for break and the season, and squeeze every little ounce of potential out of each of us for us to be the best possible program that we could be. And I think that, growing through that experience and learning what that took to get that out of players, and what it didn't take to get that out of players, what it took for myself to maximize my own talents, and to continue to grow as a player, were all things that I'm super grateful for all those experiences. And, to see the program now, I think they've been in a little bit of a lull, just because, my class and, the classes before us, I felt like had that attitude, and we're so hungry to change the program. And we're going to do everything at all costs to really make an impact and leave it better than we found it. I think the younger guys were, a little bit stagnant and kind of riding the wave a little bit, but I think they're kind of coming into their own again, where it's, going to get revamped, and that energy and that, that fire in New Brunswick, which is, it's a tough town. It's a blue collar area. It's not like, some of these other schools where, it's a little bit, I wouldn't say soft isn't the right word, but it's just a little bit more patty cake. If you're in Rutgers, like you're a Rutgers guy. And if you're from Rutgers, that. So it's kind of just getting back to that hard-nosed attitude. And I think they'll be able to kind of pick it up again. But that culture that we established is still there. The lessons that we, look to instill in those guys are still there. Some of those players that I play with, and Adam Shaw and Beatties, Kieran Mullins, Ryan Gallagher, guys that, tasted what it was like to really, invest into yourself and into the program and saw success are there and then want to continue that trend.
Mm-hmm. Who were some of your favorite players some of your favorite teammates to play with at Rutgers?
My all-time favorite teammate was Scott Vita. And that's no knock on any of the other teammates I've had, just in terms of leadership, in terms of what he expected out of me as a player and a person, and what he taught me on the offensive side of the ball. There was things as a quarterback. I came in my freshman year and thought that I was just going to quarterback the offense. Learned really quickly that I did not have the confidence that I needed to, for a number of reasons. I think that kind of tailored off when I got there, and you kind of get punched in the mouth a little bit, some injuries, and then kind of just understanding that there's guys that are older than you that have been doing it for longer than you that know the tricks of the trade. He was a guy that was like that when he was a junior, and then I learned a bunch from him that year, working off of him. Came back my sophomore year and felt like for us to take a next step as a program, that I needed to take the next step as a quarterback, and he was someone that had so many skills that I needed to learn, and so much IQ that I learned from, and that we fed off each other. And it was amazing to play with him. And then, Christian Mazzone's another guy who I played with him at Rutgers for 4 years, and, we really became close on the tail end of our career. We were captains together on the offensive side of the ball. He's another guy I learned a lot from, just in terms of competing and, being at your very best every single time you step on the field, no matter what the circumstances are. And I always got so fired up when he would be in transition and make plays, stuff that I was never a defensive midfielder. So to see him do things that I wasn't doing, and then come down and shoot one on the run and score it, it's just a fire that's just like lit in me. That's amazing to see, and was so happy for him to kind of see him grow as a player, and now see him in his career at the professional level as well. So those are two guys definitely that I was had a great time playing with. And then one last guy I wish I played with more was Adam Shaw and Beatties. He tore his ACL twice and had a knee bone in a chip in his knee our true freshman year. So we only played together 1 year. And that season, our attack line was like third in the nation in scoring. So if me and him would have played together, I don't know what we would have been able to do, what Rutgers would have been like, but it wasn't meant to be. So maybe one day down the line, we'll be together again.
When you brought up Christian Mazzone, I was giggling a little bit because when you just interviewed him, I just listened to it last night, and you're like, Christian, how are you? And he goes, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm in the middle of Washington State.
Dude, but, he's a great guy though.
Yeah, I know. He was my first PLL guy I had on the podcast. So it's really cool having him on. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to talk about the PLL. So you first started off on the Whip Snakes, and then you were traded off to the Redwoods. How did you feel your season went? That first season of the PLL went with playing with the Redwoods. How did you feel the chemistry was versus like that short time you're playing with the Whip Snakes?
I thought it was good. It was definitely another experience for me to learn and grow as a player. Just coming into a team that Nat was very honest with me about his role the role that he wanted me to fulfill for the team, and the expectations he had out of me. And I was honest with him in terms of what I felt like I could do as a player. I think he saw that in camp, and saw it a bit when I was in college, and in the Florida launch when I was a rookie in MLL. And I think that they needed more chemistry on the offensive side, more poise, someone to kind of control the tempo a little bit. And that's something that I do very well at a high level, and just occupy a lot of the defense's attention, and kind of open up other guys for their success. So going into that team, that was all things that I wanted to do and bring to the table. And I had to learn to play with Kavanaugh, who's one of the most dynamic players I've ever played with, one of the most competitive guys I've ever played with. And he's a guy that I've learned a lot from in my short time with him, in terms of leadership and being clutch and coming to play when it matters most. So a guy like him, and then Garnsey kind of coming onto the slate a little bit later on, had to build chemistry with him. All of a sudden I'm playing with two lefties, which was new for me. Excuse me, just drooled a little bit. Yeah, the two lefties, and then the midfielders that we had, I think we had to kind of find a little bit more of a balance, and I think that's something that we were looking for this season, and then kind of going to the next season. So overall, it was a great first year and a great first run for me, and it was unfortunate that I wasn't able to to play this past season, but I'm excited to continue to grow for the next 6 to 8 months, as a player and as a person, as a leader and a teammate, and get bigger, faster, stronger, become smarter and more talented, and kind of bring that all to the table for those guys, to be the best team that I can be in 2021.
So this is a little bit more of a technical question. How would you guys run a two lefty attack, especially if you're at X? What was your set like? What kind of sets would you guys run during the season?
So it ended up usually being me and Garnsey behind, or Cab behind with me, and then we'd rotate a guy through the crease, and then kind of pop out behind X as we kind of a 3-man rotation like that. And Cab also likes to operate from that high wing area. I can operate from the high wing area. So it's just kind of putting us in spots, and letting the other guy dominate the ball a little bit more. If you have two lefties behind, the one lefty wants to get to the left side, so you could play a little 2-man game. You can kind of stand closer to the crease, let him go. There's a lot of things you could do. Cav can drive up that righty side and get back to his left hand well. Garnsey is more of a lefty, a strong lefty. So, want to let him get up that left side a little bit more. So it's just finding what, which the tendencies are for guys, what their strengths are, where they want to be most of the time, and then playing to that. And I think, for me, it's easy because I can leak out either left or right side, and it doesn't matter. So if Cab wants to go left, I'll go right for him. If Garnsey wants to go right, I'll leak out left and then pop behind the ball and do whatever. So I think that's why it works well.
Yeah, that sounds like it seems like it did work. It did work in the end. But then I think about, you had a third lefty on your offense. You had Joe Walters from the Middies. So that must have been. Do you think it was something that you've never played with before, so you kind of had to sink in with that?
No, I think me and Joe were very quick to find chemistry, just because he is a very high IQ player. He's been playing the game for over the professional level for like over 15 years now. And, he just understands what he does well, and lets guys, play to their strengths, and puts himself in spots in the field that he knows he's going to be successful in. So, when he has the ball on his stick, I know he's always looking for me off ball. When I have the ball on my stick, I know that he's going to be trying to put himself in the right spots off ball. So, it's definitely any new team, you're going to grow and learn things about each other. But I personally feel like I'm very malleable in terms of my skill sets and where I can play on the field. So it's not hard for me to adapt to what my teammates' strengths are, and then play to whatever strengths I need to in that moment, because there's not a lot of weaknesses for me in terms of being two-handed and just being able to play off ball or on ball.
Yeah. So kind of like what I said in about who are your favorite teammates at Rutgers, it's going to be kind of a reverse question. Who has been like some of your biggest competitors in the PLL, either a defender or like an entire defense that you've had to go against?
The easiest answer is the Whip Snakes. They're the best defense in the league, in my opinion. Outside of our defense, I don't play against our defense every week, but defenses that I need to play against, they're the most cohesive unit. All those guys have been off-ball players in their career, and all of them have also been the number one on-ball player in their career. And it makes it for really tough on a team, especially with our shot clock and the way that they fill spots behind the ball. When you draw doubles, they cover up really well. And then, when you do get it to that next guy in the offense, that guy's filling very fast with a great approach angle. So it's just something you need to be very buttoned up and have all 6 guys in the field working in cohesion. Because if you don't, and you only have 5 guys working in cohesion, and one of your players on the offensive side forgets to shift over or pop behind the ball or, flash cut when it opens up, and they have all six working and filling and closing gaps. It just limits the amount of times that, you're going to be able to create offense, because when you are dodging against them, they're hard to get by also. So even when you do draw slides, it's more rare. So it's definitely a defense that I believe it stands in the way of me and the Redwoods, winning a championship, and we have to figure out ways to beat them and beat everyone. But, you want to be able to beat the best in the game. And they're definitely the best defense in the game.
Also doesn't hurt that they've been playing with each other since like 2013 or 2014. So it's been a 6-year of the same defense. Did you ever play Maryland when you were at Rutgers? Yeah, you must have.
Played them every year. I took them to triple overtime my junior year. Should have won that game. Well, could have, would have, should have, but that would have been great. I'd never beaten Maryland before. My first win versus those guys came on. Last year I got traded to the Whipsnakes. I went to the Redwoods. It was our third game of the season, and I beat them. And then we lost them 2 more times in a row. And then we lost them this year. So I'm going back next year, bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, and a better player. So I can put myself in a position to help the team in the Redwoods beat them. So
my last question for today, to incorporate the name of the podcast in the show, here are 2 questions I want to ask to you. So what is one of your lows while playing lacrosse? It could be like a bad pass, a bad shot, like a game you lost, or an embarrassing moment on the field. What do you think that might be for you?
Does the injuries count?
Yep.
So I got a concussion last year. That was one of the most difficult moments of my career, just because of how it impacted me mentally, kind of post-concussion. And that was, I got cross-check in the head versus the chrome, and that took me out of that game. And that was difficult to watch because, I felt like I needed to be out there to help us win. And ultimately we ended up winning anyway, which is, very relieving on my shoulders, just because I knew that I was an important part of the team. But, when you can't help and you're useless, it's a tough position to be in. So to see us win that game was amazing. And then, but kind of post after that, it was hard for me. So that was definitely one of the lows of my career.
And the counterpart to that question, what has been one of your highs while playing in your career?
I think one of the best moments in my career has been, we played Penn State my sophomore year, and that was, I think, one of the defining moments of Rutgers lacrosse. Just kind of taking that next step as a program was, winning Big Ten games, and that was an important Big Ten game to win for us to try to position ourselves for the postseason. And we beat them 16-14, and I had 8 points that game, and it was senior night. And I felt like I was really cementing myself as the type of player that I was trying to become, and that it kind of coincided with the program that Rutgers was trying to become as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks so much, Jules, for coming on the Low to High podcast. I really appreciate it. I think this could be a really good second season opener. So really appreciate it. I'm gonna definitely be watching you during the PLL season next year, and I hope you have a great rest of your 2020 and a good 2021.
I appreciate that, my man. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. See ya.